Speaking of things that cost our tax dollars but don't benefit us in any fashion, Trump's ballroom.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to enter into the record a report from the Democratic staff of the Senate Help Committee, which found that the Office of Civil Rights reached a 12-year low last year in protecting students from discrimination. Good morning, Secretary McMahon. We're here to talk about the budget for the Department of Education, so I'd like to ask you a couple of questions about school funding and funding in our schools. Can you tell me how much more or less it costs to give a child free lunch at a public school?
Well, the Department of Education does not control, that's not part of our budget.
I know, but when the USDA does that funding, it's about $4.60 for a school lunch. Do you know about how much the average school teacher makes at a public school per year?
That varies across different states. It can be anywhere from 40-some thousand to 90-some thousand.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. It's about $64,000 on average nationwide. So here's an easy one because it's all over the news. Can you tell us how much Congress is being asked to vote on next week for President Trump's ballroom?
I don't know that answer.
It's $1 billion. And you're a businesswoman, so I'm hoping you can help me do some math here. $4.60 for a school lunch, $1 billion for a ballroom. Can you tell me about how many free school lunches that $1 billion could pay for?
It is my understanding on the ballroom, excuse me, and I've heard the president say this, the taxpayer dollars will not be used to build the ballroom, that they are donations from private enterprise.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll have entered into the record some Republicans, this article from NBC yesterday, some Republicans aren't sold on $1 billion price tag for Trump's ballroom project in party line GOP bill.
Without objection.
We are voting on $1 billion in taxpayer dollars in addition to those private donations. And so for those $1 billion in taxpayer dollars at $4.60 a lunch, that is 217,391,304 lunches. That's lunch for more than 1 million kids, 1 million Americans for the entire school year. But let's say that we're not going to talk about lunches because that's USDA. We can talk about teachers. At $64,000 a year, do we know how many new teachers we could hire if we sent $1 billion out to the states for reducing class sizes and hiring more teachers?
I'm sure you have that number.
Yes, it is 15,000 more teachers. Or we could pay for the Office of Civil Rights that's being cut in this budget 7 times over. I think you get the point. So here's my real question here. As Secretary of Education, which do you think helps our nation more? Getting free lunch to more than 1 million more kids, 15,000 more teachers, or the ballroom?
I think those are incredibly weird comparisons. I do believe that our teachers should be paid well for what they do. I think teachers are underpaid. I think teachers should also be paid for performance. And I would like to see us have our teachers be compensated. I'd like to also see that there would be teachers who were paid more than administrators in schools. We have more administrators, and they're paid higher salaries than our teachers are. And I think state budgets, all of that, should take all of that into consideration when they're hiring their teachers, because it is state budgets that
Then I do think it is weird that next week, like you said, it's a weird question, because it's weird that next week we're being asked to vote for $1 billion for a ballroom while there are cuts to the Department of Education and cuts to education.
What you see here is a classic case of a very good direct question.
By former WWE superstar, Lyndon. No, I'm just kidding.
No. By Greg Casar, who's he's one of those like rising congressional Democrats that I really, really like because he's really good on the issues, but he's also really good at doing this kind of questioning, which is the kind of questioning that AOC got known for really well.
Yeah. But when AOC does it, it's because she's a woman.
Well, yeah, fair enough. And what McMahon, Education Secretary Linda McMahon, is doing here.
Not related to Vince McMahon, right?
Well, actually, they're married. Fun story.
Oh.
Actually, her only qualification to be Secretary of Education is that she was the wife of the guy who started WWE. I'm not sure where the education.
It's a very educational program.
Yeah, I'm not sure where the education comes into play, but I'm sure it was qualifications somewhere. Maybe she was a teacher for all of 5 minutes. I don't know. But what she's doing here is a clear example of what's called filibustering, which can be done by senators in there, but it can also be done by people that are being interviewed. And it's a classic way of saying, I'm not going to answer your question. I'm just going to talk around it until you run out of time, which is why you'll often see members of Congress interrupting witnesses and saying, reclaiming my time or something of that nature.
Right.
Because they recognize that all the person is doing is just running out the clock. And they're like, no, I would really like to actually have an answer to this question, so I'm going to preserve my time. You're going to shut the fuck up, and you're going to answer the question.
Right.
Which Kassar will get to later, but yeah, this is the classic case of you were caught red-handed, and her saying that's a really weird comparison is funny because it's pretty on-ball comparison. Like $1 billion for this ballroom, dead to rights with the article that he introduced, versus also literally saying that it's not taxpayer-funded dollars when we have it on record that it's going to be taxpayer-funded dollars because Trump is a fucking liar and a scammer and a con artist. And then comparing what that $1 billion would do for the rest of the budget. It's really not like when I was in budget class in UWGB, that was one of the things that I did was we were tasked with balancing the federal budget. And I figured out, similarly to what Zoran has done in New York City, how to completely balance the budget without cutting social services at all and still giving everybody universal health care. You love my budget, everybody. But one of the reasons that they get away with that kind of stuff is by doing stuff like this, where it's like, oh yeah, we're going to spend $1 billion on this ballroom. We're going to spend, God knows how much for this war in Iran. We're going to spend, X amount of money sending J.D. Vance to Hungary to campaign for a Hungarian president, because that's what the job of the vice president is in the Constitution.
He went to TPUSA, so...
That too. And all of these things cost money, and Republicans have always been the party of, but what about the deficit?
Right.
And how do you pay for that? And all this other stuff. And centrist Dems, to their not credit, I should say, also go along with that.
Right.
Deficit mongering. But no, fuck you. Stop wasting our money on this shit when we could also have free universal health care.
And deficit-wise, friendly reminder that universal health care is actually cheaper because we do not have to pay the middlemen, the bloaters, the insurance companies that are running everything up, right? Like, it's cheaper and it is literally better for everybody. Speaking of things that aren't making anybody's lives better, J.D. Vance is cutting Medicaid to California. He says it's not political. It doesn't have anything to do with who they voted for. Whether or not that's the case, he's responsible for the suffering of millions of Americans by doing this.
Also, the things being bad for you is a reference to both the cutting of Medicaid and J.D. Vance.
Reason is because the state of California has not taken fraud very seriously, and because of that, we see a lot of the consequences that I just referenced. And again, let me highlight the fact that this really is two separate victims. So there are California taxpayers and American taxpayers who are being defrauded because California isn't taking its program seriously. But also you have people who've been prescribed medications that they don't even need. Sometimes they've had drugs put into their bodies that they don't need because fraudsters have actually encouraged false prescriptions and false administration of medications. So think about this. You're just a person trying to go see a doctor. You assume that your doctor is doing the right thing, but these fraudulent healthcare providers are getting rich by giving people medications they don't even need. It's a defrauding of the American taxpayer, but it's a violation of the trust that should exist between every American and the people who prescribe the medications. That's one thing that we're targeting, and this is why we're taking this action, is because we want California to get serious about this fraud. Today, not aggressively prosecute Medicaid fraud. We are going to turn off the money that goes to these anti-fraud units. And I would say, you may think, obviously, this is a Republican administration. We're all proud Republicans up here. You may think that this is purely a red state or blue state issue. That's actually not true. We see Medicaid fraud issues in Ohio, the state that I used to represent in the United States Senate. We also see Medicaid issues, fraud issues in a state like Maryland, which is obviously a very blue state. But both Ohio and Maryland have worked with us to take this issue seriously. They've worked with the guys behind me. They've worked with our entire team to make sure that they take fraud seriously. Again, this does not have to be a red state or a blue state issue. This is just basic good government. However, states like California, states like Hawaii, states like New York have completely not taken the fraud issue seriously in the Medicaid program. And so for those states that refuse to get serious about fraud, we are going to turn off that anti-fraud money. And if we continue to find problems, we can turn off other resources within their state Medicaid programs as well. Our goal here is not to do that. We don't want to turn off any money. What we want to do is ensure that people are taking fraud seriously. We want to protect Medicaid. We want to protect Medicare. But we can't do that if the states that are administering those programs are allowing those programs to be fleeced by fraudsters.
Nothing really convinces me that it's not a red or blue state issue, like making sure you talk about that 17 times in your press release.
Also, only naming blue states as problems and only naming a single blue state with a red state as good guys.
Yeah, and like you want to talk about how they've only looked into fraud and like the Democrat strongholds, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like Minnesota first and then California. When you are talking about fraud, it is such an abstract concept. If you just say the word fraud,
Yep.
right? Like they are not laying out specifics. He's just saying fraudulent medical providers. That could mean fucking anything.
You know, also, most of the fraud in Medicaid does come from providers, but cutting off the money to the state isn't going to fix that. It just means that they can't pay out that Medicaid money to the people in California, which means the people in California are getting completely fucked over in this deal, and it doesn't even address the providers at all.
You want to know what's a fraudulent medical provider? Chiropractors. They want to come after fucking fraud, dude. They don't have fucking medical degrees. Like, that's fraud. They're quite literally, blatantly frauding you on social media, like prescribing different shit to you to make you feel better, and the motherfuckers didn't go to med school. Like, the fraud that they are actually looking at, like, is not the issue. It's the shit that they like because it benefits them. That is the real fraud.
Mm-hmm.
So Dr. Oz, genius that he is, announced
That's a whole nother...
that during this period, it will intensify targeted investigations, deploy advanced data analytics, and accelerate the removal of hospice and HHA providers from the Medicare program that are suspected of committing fraud.
Oh my god.
Fucking suspected. Innocent, I mean, there's plenty of fraud, but it comes from the provider's end. Like, all these cuts are going to harm the people that depend on this healthcare and probably not do a damn thing to those committing the fraud. But the second line that I found really, really telling is that J.D. Vance notified all 50 states that if they don't aggressively prosecute Medicare fraud enough, he is going to freeze funding to their Medicaid fraud control units. If you don't aggressively prosecute fraud enough, he is going to remove your ability to prosecute Medicaid fraud and then cut Medicaid funding to your state because you haven't fucking prosecuted the fraud enough. Like, this is literally nothing but cutting healthcare to make people suffer. That's there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That is all it is.
If you listen to the man, he very clearly said that this is good governance.
I see. No, you know what happened? Trump and all of his fucking little crony cucks left to go to China, and J.D. Vance was all in his feels that he didn't get invited to go.
Peter Thiel's like, quick, I convinced him to go to China. Now I need you to do something that's going to make people depend on their techno-feudalist overlords.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Also, by the way, one of the things that they're talking about data analytics driven solutions and stuff, it's AI. AI is going to be scraping through that shit. It's not going to know what the fuck it's looking at. You can call this a prophecy if you want to.
Ooh.
Want to bet the clinics that are going to be targeted the most under this, probably? Fuck it, I'll bet both of my nets right now that the majority of clinics that get shut down under this are going to be clinics that only provide gender-affirming care and nothing else. And they're going to say that it's fraud because it's not real care.
We need somebody in the comments to take Emma up on that bet.